It's your podcast. We gave up on episode numbers because Grania was number 5 and Miles was number 4, and they became number 4, number 5. But this is your podcast, episode 6. You're very welcome along. If you're watching the video, thank you very much for taking the time out to watch the video as well. You can catch the podcast everywhere you get good old quality podcasts these days. My name is Ken McGuire. On the left of the couch is Andy Murphy, and today we are joined by Pat Divilly, fitness speaker, motivational speaker, and as of February, BJJ purple belt. Congratulations.
Yes, you've done the research. Thank you. That was,
Andy's only raging. It's good.
Shut up, Ken. There's been a few people. I was talking to Lydia Daydal. You probably know Lydia. And she's a 4-stripe blue, so I was on her podcast a couple of months ago. I said, I'll race you. But you tell yourself it's all about the journey and it's not the destination, but it feels good when you
it feels good to win. She's still going around wearing nothing but purple to all the shows now at the moment.
That's what I was telling you. Got the belt, and then the next day I went to Africa for 3 weeks climbing a mountain, or 2 weeks. And so I haven't got to wear my belt. Oh, got to wear my belt once since, so I should have brought it up the mountain.
Came in wrapped around your head today. What are you about?
With the new purple stripe on the car as well. It was a really, really nice touch.
Subtle, eh?
Yeah, subtle as a brick. Pat, first up, thank you very much for taking the time out to join us for this afternoon. There's loads to talk about, but your story is an interesting one. It's an interesting one for people who, are looking at going out on their own. They're looking at exploring fitness. They're questioning themselves and how they can make themselves better. They've got a lot of questions about life. I'm kind of raging now because I had a copy of your first book at home that I found that I meant to bring down, but that kind of came a little bit later. 2012.
Yeah.
You kick off. Fitness side of things is going up.
Yeah.
Talk a little about that. Your first clients, your first start on the fitness side of things.
Well, I moved to England when I was 21, so I went out there doing a master's in nutrition. That was my first exposure to fitness. Well, I had always been into fitness. That was always what I wanted to do. But going back 10 years, there wasn't really an industry in Ireland for fitness. It wasn't something you were going to make a career from. It was something maybe you could kind of tick away on and make a few quid, but it'd be a struggle for life, just trying to get by. Yeah. There wasn't this explosion. But funnily, we're in a gym and MMA facility here. I went to the States when I was 18 on a J1 visa to train MMA full time, and I saw what was happening in California and thought this could be possible in Ireland in the future. So I went to England, got my first couple of clients in England. I was doing a master's in nutrition. I worked full time in a gym, and it was 40 hours a week as a personal trainer where people got free personal training. And so I got a lot of experience real quick, working with people in wheelchairs, cardiac rehabilitation patients, professional athletes. I just got a massive kind of introduction to fitness. And then I came out at the worst of the recession. I sort of thought this is going to be handed to me. I've got a master's. I'm way ahead of the game here. And in reality, I suppose it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be to go out and make it happen. Lived in Dublin for 18 months, went up there, young man with ego that didn't believe in himself and thought that if I achieve things, eventually, I'll find that self-belief that I never really had. And that was a pattern throughout my life. From the time I was young, I was bullied a little bit, and then I would wear different masks to fit in with different groups, and then I would use alcohol to feel confident in social settings as I got older. And then the next kind of ideation of that was, I'm going to be successful now. Like, it was always a mask, because I didn't believe in myself. And to fail in Dublin, so I struggled for 18 months in Dublin trying to get something off the ground. Didn't have any business acumen, didn't have any network, didn't have any work ethic in retrospect. I think I was an entitled young lad, to be honest. Yeah. And eventually admitted defeat, came back to Galway with my tail between my legs and spent 6 months in the darkness just trying to figure out, what's the plan from here. And eventually someone gave me a little bit of encouragement that prompted me to start a little fitness class on the local beach, and that was my 5 clients. So I suppose that was maybe the first 5 clients you're referencing when we say back in 2012. It's funny, we never know what's going on in other people's lives. Sure. And I'm sure to them I was a young guy that had the answers and knew something, where in my head I was a lost guy that knew nothing. But 5 people being in front of me a couple of times a week was enough to give me a bit of purpose and meaning in life that kept me going. And this became a bit of a culture. Like I said, if I believe in these 5 people, give them a great experience a few times a week, it'll grow. And that's kind of what happens. So the book you're referencing, I laugh at the cover of that book.
That's why I'm raging it. It'd be great for the video side. I'm sure people can pull it up on Amazon.
It's like something that was done on
paint.
paint.
Your little Superman type of a pose. Like,
baby
this is me. I have arrived.
This is me, my baby gap. Funny story with that book was, fast forward a year from starting on the beach. And I think Facebook, I had about 20,000 followers, which was a lot at the time. And people asked where that came from. I was doing a lot of free programs. I was doing a lot of before and after pictures. I was doing a lot of free content, which was just not happening as much at that time. But I announced on Facebook, I've just finished my first book. Would anyone like to publish it? When in reality, I hadn't started a book. But I sat in a meeting a week later with a publisher. And the guy looked at me, this old guy, and he's passed away since, John. He was a great guy to give me a chance. But he sat there with me and he goes, "So, I hear you're popular." And I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And he says, "What's the story with this book?" Which hadn't started. And I said, "Give me 3 weeks of a few photos to get taken and then we'll be good." And I got the head down then for 3 weeks and got the book done. And that went well. And then the following week he came back and he says, "So, are you still popular?" And I was like, "I think so." I was like, "Do you want to do another one?" I was like, "I suppose." So yeah, that was the first book.
Had you envisioned that?
It's funny, I tell people in one breath, everything that's happened for me was completely unbelievable and I thought would never happen. And then on the flip side, it's like, this is everything I ever wanted. Yeah,
because it seems like such a switch going from Dublin, so cocksure of everything. And like you said, you come home with your tail between your legs going, I don't know what I'm doing. And then bang, light switch moment and things.
Yeah, they say, I suppose, the greatest moments of struggle in your life are the seeds for opportunity or whatever, if you choose to look at it that way. But I think I let go of expectations when I came back to Galway. My big thing in Dublin, if I was to sum it up to like one problem in the way I thought, was that I wanted to have 100 clients before I had one. I was obsessed with getting somewhere, and it wasn't about the journey, it wasn't about helping people, it was more about like, I want to be somebody. Yeah. Whereas when it came to Galway, I was like, well, to get 100 clients, surely you have to get your first 5 first and do a good job, or this thing's, you can only sell shiz once, so you got to provide a good service. And so I became more intentional. It wasn't about specific goals as much as it was about be a better trainer, be a better communicator, be a better person, and see what happens.
Different mindset to get yourself into?
Yeah, for sure. And I just think, it came naturally because I think we're generally spurred by either inspiration or desperation. I think people that find their inspiration in life are very lucky, particularly the people that find it early. And that's why it's great to have a facility like this where, potentially in the future kids are going to come in and do jiu-jitsu and they're going to find it early and it's going to keep them on a good track. But a lot of us, I suppose, we maybe don't have that inspiration. We're not clear on what we want. And so oftentimes it comes to a point of desperation where things are so bad, you've got to make a change. So for me, it was desperation. It was like, I'm 24, I'm completely lost. Everything I told everyone I was ever going to achieve has fallen apart. They were all right. I was wrong. It's not going to work. And so you got to reassess.
So you go from there to your own facility. Things move off the sand and into somewhere not unlike where we are today. What was that move like?
That was my dream since I was a kid. I stepped foot in a gym when I was 14 for the first time, and it was the first thing that gave me a bit of confidence, and I promised myself, like, this is what I'm going to do the first time I stepped in. And so it was just nice, kind of like what you have here. It was my own spin on things. It was very unique. It had a lot of character. It was a basic community. It was so refreshing to have people from 16 up to 60 and older coming in, training side by side, leaving with smiles on their face, having the crack, having the banter. It's funny because you think when you get into fitness, it's about push-ups and broccoli. I always said that, and you think, and as you mature and get a bit wiser, I suppose, with age, you come to see that it's more about belief and belonging are my 2 words. So make people believe they can do things they didn't think they could do, and give them a sense of purpose and community. Because the 2 things we lose, particularly as we get older, are connection to ourselves. So we forget the person we wanted to be, and we instead become the person we think we have to be. And then we lose the connection to others as well, because again, we're all wearing those masks, which we sometimes don't let down. And I think with fitness, you can let the mask down because you're sweaty and you're kind of ugly looking when you're in the middle of 100
Everybody's
burpees.
in the same boat.
Yeah, yeah.
To hide,
And there was magic in that too. You've got, a 16-year-old kid who's going through school next to a 60-year-old dentist who's a multimillionaire. you can't pay anyone to do your push-ups for you, as they say, and so you've got to, that's where confidence comes from. It comes from doing the work yourself, and lessons come from doing the work yourself, and true happiness comes from working towards something that's meaningful, and I think fitness teaches people that. So again, doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank, if you come to the gym, you've got to work if you want to get results, and that's where your self-esteem comes from.
Any big learnings or takeaways from the time of having your own facility up until the point where you stopped and parted ways with it?
I'm very bad at managing people, would be one. people see certain strengths that I have. I'm sure they see my weaknesses too, but they only see a fraction of my weaknesses. Management was definitely something I struggled with. There's a good book called The E-Myth. It's the entrepreneurial myth, and it looks at the three sort of people that are needed in business. You got the entrepreneur who's got the big ideas, the manager who takes those ideas and puts a plan to them, and then the technician who executes the plan. And one of the mistakes entrepreneurs make is they have the big idea, and then they get caught up being the technician and being the manager, and then the passion and the creativity starts to disappear. So that's why it's great to have a good team around you. But I was good at managing a team of a couple of hundred people going to a Tough Mudder. But managing 4 or 5 staff was a struggle. Just not a strength. Something I probably could have evolved and I could have developed like anything else. We can develop skills, but it wasn't really a priority to me. But the big lessons in the gym, I don't know.
Not to put you on the spot now.
There's so many. I spend my life looking at what are the lessons that's been experienced here. What was probably a big one was to get something new, you've got to let go of whatever you're holding in your hand, so you can't grab something new. Does that make sense?
This is like exactly the conversation we had at lunchtime.
We had this, really. It's gas, you say that. Yeah. Like for me, letting go maybe of where we were at. Was it Thrive on Sunday, and there's a conversation about how they find is it water in I can't remember what the country. Tom. It was a very good. I thought it was fascinating for me, because letting go is a huge element of healing for me. Since my neurological issues with vertigo and brain fog and all that stuff, I won't blabber on about it again. But the idea of just letting go, like if the monkey holds on to the bananas for too long, then he's not going to break free from the cage. The bananas are stopping him from getting away, and he's just trapped by that, So I found it fascinating now. And I guess you say that there now, sat beside me today.
It's when I had the gym, which was the dream forever, you get the thing that you wanted, and then you kind of, I suppose the scarcity part of you says, this is what I wanted, and so I better hold on to it, and I should be grateful, and I should always love this. I suppose I got to a point where I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I was telling you, Andy, that it got to the point where I said, I'll go in 1 day a week and I'll see my clients 1 day a week, and that's enough, and then they'll be happy enough. They'll recognize I'm busy with other things. And then when the 1 day a week became a chore, it was like, no, this isn't me anymore. But the fear for me was, this is a staple of the community now. These people have helped me go from nothing to something. Yes. Yeah. What are they going to think? Are they going to think he's gotten big for his boots? Are they going to think he's deserted us all? I had this older guy that used to train with me, and he said it jokingly, but I thought it was quite funny. He goes, "You took all our money and now you're gone." Jeez, damn. But he was joking. But
nothing like your peers to put you in your place.
But I think that's what I learned. I actually went to Tony Robbins about 5 years ago in New York. Wow. And I like Tony. I like his content. I don't connect with him massively. He's polarizing. I don't particularly warm to his character, but his content's phenomenal. He's the best at that stuff. And within 5 minutes of being in the room, it's funny, like when you need to hear something, oftentimes it just appears. And he said something to the effect of, when you start something new, like you start this place, you're creative and you're inspired and you're energized and you're coming from a place of, I've got nothing to lose. Yeah. And so you go and you do the thing your way. And he said, once you build something, suddenly you have something to lose. And oftentimes people start playing it safe. And, to reference that to a fitness example, someone comes in here with weight to lose, they lose the 3 stone. And then suddenly the new goal becomes, I want to keep the weight off. Yeah. And it's this scarcity-minded thing of, I'm not moving forward anymore. I'm just trying to hold on. And again, you can't grab something new unless you let go. So for me at that point, when I heard that, I said, when I started this business, I was creative and I was having fun and I was energized. And now I'm just afraid that other gyms are going to take my clients and all this kind of stuff, which was It's a natural thing. We're survival-based creatures,
Sure.
but you got to be cognizant of that, I think.
I think that's fascinating as well, because before I opened here, the last thing, a very good friend of mine, John Windell, he manages WIT Arena. And before I went to manage Whites or Wexford, when I was in Kingfisher, he said to me, look, I got the job as a leisure centre manager there. He said, look, if it doesn't work out, there's always a place here for you, right? And I got into management. I was doing a great job, but I wasn't enjoying it. So what did I do? I picked up the phone, was back onto John. Hey, John, any chance I can back into Kingfisher? He opened the doors straight away, and I was back in. I was back in that comfort zone, that safe zone. John was then managing WIT Arena, where I then went back to work in when he went to manage there. And he's always supported me. He's always kind of said, Andy, you should have your own gym. You should be doing this. And I was like, I can't. And then I got to a stage where my sports psychologist asked me a question, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And this was before the Bellator fight. And on the way home, as I said to a few people, that question, the answer was actually this, urban gym. This is what I was afraid of. It was never a fight or anything like that. Doing this was what I was afraid of. And finally he said, you know what, Feck, I'm going to go for it. Now that I can see straight again and my body's kind of come back to normal, where I should be. We went for it and we are here now. But it's gas because the second last day before I finished in WIT Arena, John was there shaking my hand and said, thanks so much for everything here, Andy, blah, blah, best of luck. So look, if it doesn't work out, there's always a place here for you. And I just remember saying to John, that I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but I said, John, I actually need to nearly take that statement away. I need you not to offer me that. I can't have that. I can't have that safety net of knowing if this fails, I have the WIT Arena to fall back upon. Like I've gone all in on this, and thankfully so far we are thoroughly enjoying it. And I understand the trials and tribulations that are ahead, no doubt, running a gym. But you do have to think. You have to have that fear factor. I feel anyway that like even when I'm not feeling well, or I'm not that energetic, or I'm tired, as soon as I walk through here, I'm kind of energized because this is like, it's me and Marine obviously run the place, and then it's just my two kids now. And if I don't have the gym running, then there's nothing for my family either. So taking away that safety net makes me push on days when maybe the energy's not there. But I love doing what I do, so it challenged me to keep pushing.
Okay. Was that ever part of you? I know, like this week's podcast or last week's podcast, you start to delve into.
You're on the ball.
We had your microchip, Pat.
I was watching your car the whole way down.
Usually people are like, "Tell me about your childhood." Like, okay.
No, we don't do that stuff. Right. But you've been chatting about failure, and maybe like, not changing people's perception of failure, but some people see failure as the be all and end all, and it's like, it's desperation. It's like, I'm done. I have nothing. I cannot succeed. I cannot see a way past this. You have that. The concern over that safety net. Was that a failure? Am I falling back here? Is this my route out? And where do I go from here? But that's something that you do talk an awful lot about it.
Yeah, and I think it's something I probably need to double down on and talk about more. And when I do workshops and seminars, I think it's very common sense, the stuff that I say, and that makes me aware that I really need to live the stuff as much as possible, because the only way I can prove what I'm saying is right is to be doing it in every capacity of my life. So I tell people, write down 3 wins you had today to build your confidence. I tell them, write down your 3 priorities for the day to have a bit of focus. And people are like, oh, okay, they listen, but they don't listen. But if I do that myself for the next year, that's 1,000 things I've done I've done well, and 1,000 priorities, and I'm in a different position in life. And then people are saying, how are you doing all that you're doing? I'm saying, I'm doing what I told everyone to do a year ago.
It's like if you were listening to me at the time.
Yeah, well, look, I'm the same. There's times where I don't do what I need to do, but with the failure thing, look, there's an old analogy in the personal development space that if your kid is learning to walk and they aren't very good at it the first couple of weeks, you don't decide, well, they're not very good at that, and give up on them. You recognize, you just do it until you can't. You don't mess it up anymore. And seemingly with adults, we'll try something 2 or 3 times, and we say, I've tried everything. That's something we see in the fitness space. I've tried everything, I can't lose weight. And it's what does tried everything actually look like? It's 2 or 3 different things, jumping from one thing to another, never staying consistent with one thing. And that's not to knock on anyone, it's actually to hopefully empower someone that there's nothing wrong with you, and it's not that you can't do the thing. It's just you haven't given yourself a chance. And I want people to give themselves a chance. I'm not belittling anyone or trying to, you know, shame anyone in any way by saying you haven't given this a proper go. I'm actually trying to make them see that, you know, you can do anything. Like, it's funny with work and things like that. If your boss gave you an assignment and said, this is your new role, you'll figure out how to do it because there's a bit of accountability there. But sometimes outside of that, we maybe don't give ourselves the same chance to be bad at things. I had a concept last year of the 100 hours, and the first 100 hours was pick something that you'd like to be good at and give 100 hours to it and have no expectation to be good at it, to look cool, to figure it out. Just do it for 100 hours and let go of the expectation and see what happens. Because the first 20 hours will be ugly and the next 20 will be a little bit better. And then typically, if you do anything for 100 hours, let's say if you learn Spanish for 100 hours, you'd probably be able to hold a conversation. There's actually quite a steep learning curve of you get to a decent level. And then you decide, is this something I want to master? And that's when you double down. But if you can get through the first 100 hours, you build confidence, you get over the feeling of being awful at something. And one other thing maybe people to remind themselves of, this is something we see on jiu-jitsu mats all the time, someone saying, I'm bad at this. And it's like, are you bad at this or have you not done this before? Yeah. How much have you done this? I've done 10 sessions. Well, the guy you're training with has done 200 sessions. I mean, you know.
It's cash you said because we've a beginner's course starting for MMA. There's not a plug, by the way, for MMA.
Get in there.
I know.
Get in there.
No, it's not. but genuinely,
podcast.
I know. But we've built a team now. The guys after a year and a half, they're getting very good. So when a person comes in for the first class on a Tuesday or Thursday, they say the exact same. They just feel that they're not that good. It's not that they're not that good. It's just that crew that I have now, they all started together a year and a half ago, and through volume over time, consistency on the mats, they've got very good. Some of the guys who maybe started and haven't been for a while and then come back in, and they come back in onto the mat, and because they're behind the guys that they started with, they perceive that they're not that good themselves anymore. It's not that they're not good, it's just the other guys who have kept turning up have evolved and continue to get better. I think that's the biggest thing with something like jiu-jitsu is that, like, you know, it's forever evolving. If you spend time on the mat, you're gonna get good at it. And then if you become the big fish in that pond, it's very important for that big fish to then, you know, branch out and go to maybe another pond. You're not cheating on your club by going train with other guys or better bodies, or like we're going to do today, get a bit of a roll together, challenge yourself with different bodies that you don't know the movements. It makes you better. It's just that element of, to steal from Conor again, nearly that element of getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. And that's what jiu-jitsu certainly does, I feel, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, there was guys that were white belts when I started, but they had a couple of stripes on the belt, and they'll reappear now and they'll do a double take when they see a purple belt, and they're like, how did you do that? And I'm like, I train 6 times a week for the last 3 years, and I haven't missed this, you know, I don't miss sessions, and I'm not talented at anything in life, really, only you'd shown up. And
you practice, you know, what you preach. I thought we were talking before you arrived as well, it's just the elements of, like, you put yourself in the fire and then you're forging steel by doing it. But I think, you know, even with all the talks that you do, you know, certain people out there can talk a good game, but the element of jiu-jitsu, like when you step onto a mat as a purple belt or a blue belt, or even when you get your first stripe, you better have earned that, because as soon as you have a belt around your waist, someone has a perception of you as being a certain level or whatever. Like, that's the thing. Whereas I generally love doing no-gi. Certainly my guys, when they compete against people who come into a gym and they're no-gi and they have no color belt on them, they just go at it. Just the techniques that they've learned with me or with the guys around them, a neck is a neck, a foot is a foot, an arm is an arm. Nothing changes.
It's a funny one, though.
But yeah,
you take away the colours and it's a totally different game.
Yeah, like I had a guy here, a couple of guys that were purple belt level lads, on the day we had our charity event, and my guys, they don't even have, like, some of them only have like a tip on their belt, because we don't do lots in the gi here, but they've done a lot of no-gi and a lot of wrestling and MMA. And my guys were hanging with these purple belts, no bother with tapping them as well, submitting them. So the mad thing was, though, I guarantee if we did a gi session that day, they wouldn't have been doing as well as they were doing, because they perceive them that this guy's a purple belt, he's good, he's, you know, and you can defeat yourself before you've even stepped onto a mat with someone. Whereas I've when I first started in martial arts, I used to think if you're a black belt, you're fucking unbelievable. You know, I can't hang with you. Whereas now, not that I don't have any respect for black belts, I certainly do, certainly BJJ. But
screw all,
you know,
black belts.
But like, you know, I remember my amateur debut was, I was fighting a judo black belt, you know, and this was back in 2011, you know, and this was like old school rules, like, you know, when you're an amateur, it's like 4-ounce gloves, no shin pads. You know, you were allowed to go full contact to the head, striking on the feet, but you weren't allowed to throw shots on the ground, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But you know, when I look back to that event that night, did I maybe have a bit of self-doubt because I knew the guy was a black belt? Yes. Would I have that self-doubt? No. Now, knowing what I know, no. You know, so I try and instill that in the guys that come in. Like, you know, everybody, like yourself, Pat, you know, you got a neck, you got an arm, you got your legs, you got your feet. If you turn up enough and you practice a technique enough, you're going to get good at that technique. And then it's just about applying it then when you're under a little bit of pressure.
I did Grappling Industries last year in Amsterdam.
Oh, yeah.
And they do the open class first. So I had signed up to the open class and I did the no-gi. And I did all right in my first match and I lost. I got heel hooked. And I looked at the guy after and I was like, why are you wearing a brown rash guard? Like I'm a brown belt. So like,
Schoolboy hour, Pat.
I didn't have a clue. I was like 110 kilos. I was like, why are you wearing a brown? He's like, I'm a brown belt. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
And then I went to blue belts for my own brackets and I won them out pretty easy. So it was like, you put yourself again in the fire and then it's like, John Danaher's got that parable of the plank. I don't know if you've heard him tell that story. And he says when he was a young lad, a stunt man came to the school and he did all these stunts. So he lights a glove on fire and the kids are like 5 and 6. So they're just amazed at all these magic tricks and stunts. And then for his final stunt, he puts a plank of wood between 2 buildings and walks across the plank of wood and the kids are just blown away. Then he takes the plank and he comes back down to sea level or ground level and puts it on the ground. And he says, you walk across it now. And he says, the only difference between this and this is your perception and the attachment you've got to, the external. So I had a young lad a couple of weeks ago contact me on Instagram. He's like 15 and he messaged me with such anxiety and fear in his voice. And he said, I've got a school's game tomorrow. It's trials for the province in rugby. My coach has told me if I miss tackles, that's game over. I'm not going to make the team. I want to be a rugby player. That's all I want to do in life. And he just sounded so stressed. And I wrote back to him when I messaged him back on voicemail, and it just said, "You need to play the game and not the occasion because you've played rugby. That's the reason the coaches are there." And I gave him some advice, and he wrote back and he says, that's so applicable. That makes so much sense to me. Like, how do you get where I'm coming from? I was like, buddy, I'm doing a seminar tomorrow for 600 people in Dublin. I have the exact same fears as you, but I need to remind myself, I speak all the time. 600 people doesn't make any difference. It's play the game, not the occasion. So he wrote back and he says, I'm going to tape my wrists and I'm going to write PD on them to remind me of the messages, which I thought was nice.
Cool. You didn't always speak though.
Which?
You didn't always speak.
No, this was the scariest thing in the world to me, was to speak. I just didn't think my voice mattered. And I public speaking's a fear because we fear judgment and like, what will people think? And my whole life was ran by what will people think. And I've just gotten massive freedom the last couple of years just by putting myself out there and being myself. And I would say inauthentically maybe put myself out there the first few years. I mean, I started doing the fitness thing, and when I started doing the fitness thing and I was doing my YouTube videos on Facebook, it was scary, but I did it and I was myself. And then I think there was a middle ground where I had reached a tipping point, and now I'm starting to do a little bit of TV, and I started overthinking it and saying, what does a fitness guy wear? I'm like, better go out and buy some Under Armour gear. Like, I'm just a scruff. Like, I'm a caveman. I don't have any nice clothes until I got this jumper.
No worries, Pat. I got you, bro.
But I always said, like, when I was, 2015, I got an 8-week stint on the telly with a daytime TV show, and I had built a business based on community, mindset, bit of crack, a few nights out, and just bringing people together. And suddenly I get on the telly and I'm doing 8 weeks, and I start thinking, right, what are you supposed to do? And I was probably looking at YouTube videos of other guys that have been on it, and I started thinking about broccoli and sit-ups again and all this stuff. And every week I would go down and I would sit on the couch and I would decide in my head, they don't want to hear what I have to say, they want to hear the standards. Because people would send in questions. Pat, how do I get a 6-pack? Yeah. And I knew it's not do a bunch of sit-ups. Like, that's not the answer. But I felt like that's what they wanted. And then I drive back to Galway and I'd be like, I let myself down. And then I just did that for 8 weeks. Then a few years later, they asked me back on the same show, and I just went on. And I was just a renegade, and I just didn't care. I was just like, how'd you get a 6-pack? I was like, you probably don't.
Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
So how have you found that? How have you found yourself? From the whole thing of doing your wanted to do your 100 talks or the 80 odd talks that you were doing, to you flash forward to now, looking at the website last night, and you've got Dublin coming up, you've got Cork coming up, you've got the London thing coming up. Like you're saying, you've got a session for 600 people that are going to be there, kind of hanging on your every word. What's the transition from day one going, hi, I'm Pat, I'm here, I'm doing my first public speaking event, to you put up something and you go, look, I know this event is going to sell out and I know all of these people are going to come here. There's got to be a change in you for that.
Yeah, I think it's just been a life experience of like a very intense 8 years now. So 2012 was 8 years ago, which is kind of hard to believe. But on a business level, my business went from 5 clients to 25,000 in a couple of years. So there was some learnings in that. 40, 50 countries, climbed a couple of big mountains, took up the Jujitsu, went through some breakups, I failed at lots of things, ended up in psychiatrist and psychologist chairs. Just, I think it's all of those things, and just more than anything, it's probably like January was 21 talks in January, and after each talk you end up talking to people and you hear the stories back, and that gives you new context and ideas. It was funny because when I look back at myself 5 years ago, I'd almost cringe at the talks if I was to think about them. But a girl came to a workshop last week and she said, I did that 5 years ago and it completely changed my life. And I look back and I'm like, I didn't think that guy could change anyone's life, but obviously. But the transition is it's just learning and reaffirming. Like, I always tell people I can be inspiring for 2.5 hours on stage. You'll see my highlight reel. I could be depressed the next day like everyone else, and so I just need to remember what I say on stage. What I always tell people is it's easy to share those ideas. Anyone can be a consultant and anyone can be a philosopher and just share ideas. The hard bit is the practitioner, being a practitioner of all this stuff. So it's just a reminder to myself the next time I'm struggling with anxiety or a panic attack or something, can I come back to the tools that I preach about all the time?
Does it put pressure on you?
No, I think I come out and I say I'm probably one of the most flawed individuals in this room. That's why I had to figure this stuff out. If I was a normal individual, I'd probably have it all sussed out. I also say, look, I'm a fully rounded person. I'm not just an inspiring guy. I'm also lazy sometimes, and I'm all the things. So, no, I felt pressure a couple of years ago because I was wearing a mask and I had to show up in a certain light. I feel like I just stand there now and I just you ask me something, I give you an answer and
do your thing.
Yeah, I am what I am, and I'm okay with that.
I love that, because we talked to Grania about this as well, and the idea of like, oh, you're an Olympian, or people say to me, Andy, that's Andy the runner back in the day was runner, or Andy the MMA fighter. I'm just Andy. I like to think of myself as I'm a nice guy. I have my core values and I just live my life, and the same as yourself. But I know we talked about like, okay, you started off in fitness and now you do talks, but you're Pat Divilly. You're a nice, well-rounded guy that's quite experienced in a lot of areas, and you're just passing that knowledge to other people then as well.
Yeah, I think if I've one skill, it's taking stuff from smarter people than me and making it seem doable. And I kind of tell people in seminars, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know, but hopefully I'll say it in a voice or tell a story that makes you think, I can do that too.
Yeah, but you say taking stuff from people smarter than you. I love that idea in the sense that like you go and put yourself in the room with smarter people. You don't just say watch a YouTube clip or whatever. Like, I think anyone who follows you and that will see that you've gone over to the likes of Thailand and done immersed yourself in yoga training. Which is pretty awesome, pretty cool. You've immersed yourself on the mats with high level guys. You come around like you've got your talk tonight, and yet you're popping in the gym to do a podcast with me today and the guys. But also we're going to do some rolling and that then as well. And then if you're off to the north, you're off training with the guys up there. Like, that is cool. Like, that's like, not a lot of people would understand the fear people have walk into a gym door for the very first time. And first, you, Pat, you're going around to loads of different gyms. You put yourself, and again, you go to grappling industries or any of these competitions in Ireland, and you're a well-known guy. Do you know what I mean? So like, when you go into a competition, like, I'm going with Pat Divilly today. I'm in competition. Like, Pat's trying to take your neck. It's like glorified murder in a way, like simulated, but you have taps and all that. But
you like this one? I was it last year? I can't remember what competition, and I go to a lot of competitions on my own if my teammates aren't going. So yeah. I'll have a bunch of gyms, like people because a lot of guys came from the fitness space, got into jiu-jitsu in the last couple of years, the same journey as me. So the bunch of guys would say, "No, Pat, I'll corner you." So like, there's loads of people cornering from every side of the mat. and Paddy Houlihan was there, and I've been on his podcast a few weeks ago. So Paddy's like all corny, and I was like, cool, and like I'm like a kid, but I'm like, Paddy's cornering me, and I'm just like, and I get choked unconscious within 30 seconds. And I just wake up on the ground, and I'm looking at the ceiling.
How cool is that, though?
Yes, came back and won the no-gi, thankfully, so I redeemed myself to some capacity, but choked out within 30 seconds, and I was like, I look at Paddy, and Paddy's just like
I love that. I hate nipping on talking on this, but I remember Nathan was just born. I think he was 5 weeks old, and it was my first fight back. And I was fighting John Byrne in the Regency. And I remember Mick, who couldn't make it? Mick, Brennan, and Miles were up, but Mick had to go back to a family event or something. So I had no one. I had Miles there in the corner, but nobody else. And I remember Neil Seary was in the room because we were training out with Rhino, and Neil just comes over. And he'd been on our wedding video, you know, and someone I looked up to. I say look up to, he's smaller than me, obviously he's a flyweight. But Neil goes, all corner you. And I just remember, I was like, man, I've got Miles calling me, and I've got Neil Seary. And I just remember just walking out, just feeling just so calm and confident, and like I said, like a schoolboy nearly in a way. Just like I got a real role model shout me in the corner, was fighting at the time in the highest level of the sport, UFC. That's a really cool feeling. The same, I'm sure, having someone like Paddy, who's very knowledgeable, been on the big stage, headlined the UFC in Dublin, and then he's calling you. We might have lost our fights. I lost my fight. I lost a 3-round decision. But hey, it's still a cool story to tell, isn't it?
I went over to Paddy, and I was like, that didn't go to plan. And Paddy's like, it's mad, isn't it? Mad getting choked out, isn't it? But it was another one of those. It was like, there was two messages in my head after getting choked unconscious in my first match of the day, and lots of people seen it. I was like, number one is probably just go home now and call it a day. That was the gi, and then there was no gi later on. And then the second part was, well, it can't really get any worse than that, so I might as well go again. And went, like I say, won the no gi, thankfully. Yeah. But
so knowing that you can go into a sport, and we all do it, and we've all experienced it, where you'll go in and you'll be choked unconscious, and you'll be left in the corner, and you're kind of waking up going, why do I do this? Why jits?
Someone was asking me this at a seminar the other day. It's funny, I went to Thailand to do yoga teacher training for 200 hours in December, and we all sat in a circle and introduced ourselves on the first day, and everyone's like, I'm doing it for 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, and I was like, I've done 2 yoga classes, didn't enjoy them, but my reason for being here is there's so many people I respect and admire that seem to love yoga. And I almost feel the same thing when people ask me why jits. It's like, it's hard to explain. Like, I don't fully get the yoga thing still. I enjoyed my month, but my jiu-jitsu is my yoga. For me, it's getting out of your head. Like, the head is what causes us all a lot of suffering. Like, suffering in life is just believing your thoughts. So a thought comes up, you believe it, and you put all your attention on that, and that's effectively what it is. Like, any stress in life is an expectation. It's a story in your head about the way things should be. You're either living in the future or the past. And happiness is always in the moment. Like, as cheesy as that might sound, we tend to be nostalgic in that we're like, oh, I wish I could go back to 5 years ago when I had my gym in Galway and everyone was a little community. In reality, I had stresses then as well. Or else we live in the future. When I win the lotto, I'll be happy. And both of those things are a lie because they're not real. So Jiu-Jitsu is just one way of coming into the present moment. It just ticks a lot of boxes for me. It's community-based. It's competitive. I think men need it. I think everyone needs it. I think men... I'm doing a lot of men's work now. That's definitely a priority this year. But I think we need a level of competitiveness and like rough and ready, get out and have a little scrap and, you know, not get injured.
Not quite Fight Club territory.
Yeah, no. That's who was saying to me the other day. I was chatting to a client last night, and he was saying, you know, he's not doing the drinking thing anymore with the boys, and the boys are all still gone out. He's like, I'm struggling to bridge that gap. He said, I'm running now. He's through a bit of Thai boxing. He says, I'm beyond Thai boxing now. I'm not in the position where I want to be getting black eyes and going into work, you know. But so I was trying to get him into the jiu-jitsu. But one thing that might be useful for anyone listening is oftentimes we struggle with consistency with a certain behavior. So like a lot of people struggle every January with the gym. They can do it for January and then they fall off. And for me, I grew up training in the gym, and then at like 26, 27, I just couldn't do the gym anymore. It just bored the life out of me. I kept trying to do it, and I was struggling with the identity piece because I was like, I'm the fitness guy, surely I should like fitness. And the way I got around it was to ask, what's the result I want? And the result was not a six-pack. The result was to look and feel good and have good mental health. And then I asked, how else could I achieve that same result? And that's when jiu-jitsu came into the puzzle. So for someone who's struggling, like ultimately we all want feelings in life. Like we talk about achieving things and people like look at goals. Any goal that you want is for a feeling. Like I think if I win the lotto, I'm going to feel secure. So a faster way of going about that is to ask like what currently makes me feel secure and how can I do more of that? Because, you know, despite all the achievements, you can fight on Bellator and you can feel miserable, or you could fight on a local amateur show and feel on top of the world. Your emotional health is more important than anything. So I think if you can reverse engineer that, that's important. I just went off on a tangent there. I can't remember what the question was.
So relevant.
Originally, it was why jiu-jitsu.
Why jiu-jitsu?
But we get it. But there's...
Well, like that, I suppose jiu-jitsu makes me feel good. And it taught me... Jiu-jitsu and mountaineering, those two things. When I was in my 20s, I thought, I'll be happy when, fill in the blank. And it was, I'll be happy when I have 500 followers on Facebook. And I remember getting 500 followers, and for about 10 minutes I said, I've made it. Bow down. And then I remember walking around, I went to a restaurant in Galway, and I was like, oh, jeez, I hope nobody recognizes me.
Why have they knock off my table? I have 500 followers on Facebook. This is ridiculous.
I had the head down, I was like, I hope nobody recognizes me. I was like, this is getting intense. But then it was, I'll be happy when I have a gym, and then it was, I'll be happy. And you're momentary, like, happiness. Any material thing, Russell Brand said something to the effect of, there's never a material solution to a spiritual problem. And the two spiritual things that we need are contribution and growth. That's what they'll say, contribute to the world and grow. Everything in nature grows or it dies, and it contributes back to the ecosystem or it dies. And so growth is an ongoing thing, and it's not achieved in the attainment to something. So jiu-jitsu is an ongoing thing. Climbing a mountain, I climb a mountain for 21 days and spend 10 minutes on the top of the thing. You have to learn how to enjoy the journey, or you're making a mistake. You know,
it's a long way up and a long way back.
You do hear black belts in jits as well saying that the journey's only started now when they become a black belt, and it's taken so long. Like in jits, generally it's like 10 years to get a black belt. Not to knock any other martial arts or that, but some you can achieve. And a lot of people who come into the gym and ask, you know, the first question, how long will it take me to get a black belt? You know, a lot of the time those people aren't the ones that are really going to last. Whereas I generally love someone coming through the door and maybe doesn't know what jiu-jitsu is or BJJ, and they come in and then they start learning something like, oh, that's really cool. And then they enjoy, like you said, the process of adding strings to their bow and just getting better. I've got gym killers now on the mat that are doing phenomenal that didn't know what like an armbar was like a year ago, and now they're going home. Some of the lads I've got lads that are in 6th year now, they're getting ready for leaving cert. I know for a fact that I've got young Porig here, he's just a wizard now on the mat at this stage, and he's probably spending more time going home YouTubing like John Danaher than he is like spending time in the books. I hope his parents aren't listening, but like there's that element of it. I think you do get lost in jiu-jitsu. I think there's an element of like getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, and when you're, you know, in the midst of a deep choke going around the neck, there's nothing else you can think about than maybe trying to gather your breath. So it's a great place to just get lost. And as you said, maybe sometimes yoga is not for everybody. I love yoga, actually, in fairness. I do love switching off. But I know a lot of guys maybe don't fall in love with it. But a lot of lads fall in love with jiu-jitsu because it is very much, you know, there's an element of kill or be killed in it. You know, if there's no referee there, you know, you could be in a lot of trouble there. Do you know what I mean? But it's a great way to switch off from everyday life and grow. You know,
it's been the best decision I've ever made. I regret giving it up when I was 18, but you're lucky you can't go back. Yeah. Something that I tell people now is like, one of the things we'll tell ourselves is I'm too old to fill in the blank. And the question with I'm too old, or the response I always have is too old compared to who? Because you're obviously comparing yourself to someone. Some people like to think they don't compare themselves, and then they'll say, oh, well, I'm too old for that. Like, or my body doesn't look the way it should. If your body doesn't look the way it should, you've decided somebody else's body is how you should look. So it's comparison. And so my response is you'll never be as young as you are today. And that's been, I want to do a lot of men's work this year. And one sad thing that I see is guys I'm 32, guys from my age up, given up to some degree. Like work is everything, and family is everything, and of course family is huge, but I think to really honor your family and like be there for your family, you got to be like filling your own cup. And it's something I've seen with my own parents the last few years. They gave up everything for us to like, and they did what they felt they needed to do. But for me, seeing my dad take up kettlebells in the last couple of years, which was something I never would have anticipated, has been inspiring. And I love to see him going out there and filling his cup. And, you know, I think You know, again, guys in their 30s that have ticked a few boxes or ticked all the boxes they think society wants them to tick and then don't go any further. Coming back to that growth and contribution, a really simple thing I'm kind of encouraging clients to do now is answer 2 questions every evening. And I think those 2 questions can change lives. And the first question is, you know, how did I grow today? And be able to answer that in some capacity. And the second question is, who did I make a positive impact on today? So that's the contribution piece and the growth piece. And it's not a bad thing if I can't answer that tonight and I struggle with it. It's just a reminder. If I don't feel fulfilled, I always say there's a bit of a lag, a period of lag where I can skip all this stuff for a few days. But if I skip it for long enough, I start feeling anxious. And I know why I feel anxious, because I'm not doing the stuff that keeps me well. It's like when we've got a fitness client and they come and they say the diet didn't work, and you say, why didn't the diet work? And they say, I did the diet, lost the weight, went back to eating normal, and I put back on the weight. And, you know, or I met with a teenager a couple of months ago that's doing a project where they meditate and exercise every day before school. Wow. And yeah, he'd come from a tough background, and his social worker said it was making a massive difference. But it was very obvious to me looking at him that as soon as he stops meditating and exercising, he's back to how he was. Yes. And we're all the same. And we all have a when life works list. There's certain things that work. And then sometimes we deviate away from them because other things become more important. But your growth, your contribution, your happiness are the 3 most important things in life, I think.
What is the plan with these men only type events that are coming up?
I did my first men's retreat a couple of months ago, and the boys turned up on the Friday, and they'd all told their friends they were going meditating. They made some excuse. They didn't say they were going to a men's retreat. But I opened it and I said, firstly, I apologize if your wife sent you here. Like, that was not my intention. I thought there was going to be a bunch of angry dudes. And the second thing I said was, I've never been to a men's retreat or watched any content, so I don't know. I did that intentionally. I don't know how this is supposed to work. We're just going to see what happens and let it unfold. And it was an amazing weekend. It was really fulfilling. There was tears and hugs and everything else. It was special. And the intention, I think I'm preempting this and I'm saying it a bit early because this might not be the case, but I think it might be my primary work. You know, a year from now, I would like to have 6 or 7 big events a year where a couple of 100 men come in the room. I'd like to have breakaway groups around the country where men can go and do different things, like Dublin, Galway, Cork, all over the place. Anyone that'll take ownership of it. Like, it's called Base Camp, the event. And the theme with that is, like, when we go on mountaineering trips, base camp is where you organize yourself and you get, you know, you've got your team around you, you get well fed, and then you go and you climb the mountains. So I want the boys to come into base camp every couple of months and plan their lives and have some strategies and support. But yeah, I want there to be some big events, and then I want there to be smaller hubs around the country that just do meetups. I want there to be, you know, I'll be honest, I like to live life on my own terms, and so I want to craft a business that does. I'm into surfing, I'm into rock climbing, I'm into jiu-jitsu. I want to have rock climbing weekends, surfing weekends, jiu-jitsu weekends, bring guys in on these, hope that some of them come alive when they do these things for the first time and keep it up. And if they don't come alive doing that, hopefully they see that there's value in trying new things. That's the intention, I think.
How was the buy-in from those who were in attendance for your first one?
Well, the first one was a 3-day weekend, so it was kind of different. There was like 20 guys that came for a 3-day weekend. This weekend is 125 guys for a day, so it's a different format. And my what I'm not overthinking it, but I'm conscious of how far can I push these guys in terms of connection without it being like this orchestrated attempt to make people connect. So I like to think I can bring people together pretty quickly. So that's the goal this weekend. The buy-in was good. A good example of that was I did a men's retreat in November, and the following week I did a women's retreat. I got some flack about doing a women's retreat. Some people have said you shouldn't be doing that. You don't know about the divine feminine. I've kind of admitted that now. I don't have a fucking clue. But so I did the men's retreat and the women's retreat 2 weekends back to back. Both were really special. Both were quite different, but really enjoyable. And I said in January, it wasn't part of the plan, but I said, let's do a catch up in January. Come down to Galway, we'll grab dinner, we'll do some jiu-jitsu. And it was just a means of don't go home and just fall back into old patterns. Like, we were going to meet in 10 weeks. Make sure you've done something before we come back. And of the 20 women that attended, 3 turned up for the meetup. Of the 20 men that attended, 17 showed up for the meetup.
Wow.
And that just showed me that, women have their communities a lot of the time, and they have the social circles, and we're not as good at that. The 2 things I think we fall off on are, hobbies and social.
Wow.
And someone left a comment on LinkedIn. I thought it was a nice tagline. They said, it's nice to see lads speaking outside of the locker room in the pub.
Yeah.
And if that's what's happening, I'm
Makes
happy.
sense. I always talk about that with before and after pics. We don't do any before and after pics here. I know it's big in the fitness industry, but the thing is, I firmly believe that you say to someone 10 weeks will come in on your first day, you're feeling flawed enough anyway, or nervous and not feeling in the best shape of your life at that moment in time. Come here, stick you in front of the Urban Gym logo or banner there, take off your top for me and take a picture, and then you give them a diet plan or whatever, and you give them the 3 days a week of exercise, and automatically if they turn up they're going to change, and it's, okay, let's take a picture again, and so there's your before and after. But no one ever really shows another one in a year's time. Come back on the same date, same gym, and let's see that same photo. I'd be intrigued to see how many are. So hearing that story about the lads going away and then 17 of them coming back, it shows that they're committed to it, and they enjoyed the process, and that's the biggest thing, the process, and they can sustain it over time. Again, I come back to volume over time. You can if you're doing something good, volume over time, it'll help you get better. If you're doing something pretty bad in terms of even nutrition, that volume over time, it's going to have a negative impact on you. Do
Sorry, we were saying the difference between inspiration and desperation, and you're very lucky to find the inspiration early. And I find if you speak to someone who's done martial arts all their life and they just love it, or you find someone who found music early or found art or found anything early, they might come to a seminar or listen to me speak and say, well, that's obvious. That's the obvious, you do what you enjoy and you do it consistently, and you live in the stretch zone and all this stuff. But to the people that didn't find maybe the thing, it's not as obvious. So we get this, that's why, jiu-jitsu, you get the same lessons of be around like-minded people, be a little bit outside your comfort zone, have a coach, have some accountability, show up for yourself, do something you don't always want to do, but you feel better after doing it. All those lessons apply, whether it's in the class, wherever it is. And so people don't need to come to a seminar or a retreat to get that necessarily, but I think you got to do something. If you're missing that, I surveyed the 125 men anonymously that are coming this weekend, and again, it's kind of sad. It's a great opportunity to hopefully improve upon that, but there was a lot of guys saying, I want to be the guy I was 5 years ago. I've lost my way. And one thing I would always be saying, kind of coming back to, you can't, you got to let go of whatever it is. I think we need to let go of the idea of being the guy I was 5 years ago, because you're not that guy anymore. I'm never going to be in my 20s again. I'm 32 now. So again, when I was trying to force myself back into the gym, I was saying, well, 5 years ago, I used to love it and I want to love it again. I don't love it anymore. So find something different. So it's very important to have a future that's more compelling than your past, I think, and whatever you've accomplished, it's. I met a guy last year for a session who had been to rehab 18 times. He had 18 suicide attempts. His mother set it up. He had tried everything. It was something I didn't feel comfortable doing, but she followed me around the country to talks, and she said, believe in yourself. And I thought, I'm not a psychiatrist. I said, look, I'll meet him for coffee and let's see what happens. And he said to me the next day, it was the first time anyone had spoke to him about his future instead of just going back to the past. And I don't take any credit for that, or don't think there's anything revolutionary there, only that we do need to be looking forward. Again, the person that loses weight and then says, I want to keep the weight off, isn't looking forward anymore. They've become rigid and life is not fun anymore. That's why I used to bring clients to Tough Mudder. They lose the weight and I'd say, let's do Tough Mudder, let's do a 5K. I don't care what we do, let's do something. That keeps us moving. So
you talk about having, if the men's health area is something that you want to look into in a year's time or in 2 years' time. I don't know if you've got something of a plan towards that way, but you've got something that's got to be driving you in a direction. So you wake up in the morning, and what's driving Pat Divilly?
I always say, when I struggle with my mental health, I'm like a different guy, and it's very hard for me to connect. I'm not one of these that can take out the phone and say I'm really and do a selfie video and because I feel like that's looking for attention. I don't think it serves anyone, for me at least. And so when I'm in that space, I'm like, okay, I just got to get better again. I got to feel better again before I can do anything. And then when I come back to being this guy who feels good in himself, I can't connect with that guy. It's like two different people, if that makes sense. There's not and so when I'm this guy that's feeling good and life is going well and I'm looking after myself, I try to connect with that guy who's struggling, and I try to recognize, look, I'm on the phone to people every day that are in the horrors, and I've been there, and I'll go there again, I'm sure, in some capacity, because we're all guaranteed stress and struggle for the rest of our lives. That's my motivational spiel. So it's about becoming more resilient. But what's driving me, I suppose, is just I wouldn't be here if I hadn't, there was a night in Dublin, I sat at the docks when I was 23 and I looked in the water and I sat there for hours and I walked around the city and I thought I was going to throw myself in the docks because I was completely lost and I didn't know how to handle my emotions. I didn't think I had any value in the world. I didn't think there was any point. I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And I've been in similar places since, even when things have gone well externally, when everything looks good. And I never told that story because, again, I didn't want people to be giving me their sympathy or anything, because that's definitely not needed. It's like luckily I'm kind of moved through that. But now I see it as an important message just for the guys. There's young guys from 16 up to 60 coming up and giving me hugs and crying at the end of sessions now in front of hundreds of people, which tells me, there's a lot of us struggling. It's a small thing for me to do. It's kind of gone from an opportunity to get to speak to now it's almost like an obligation. It's like if you do a talk and someone's helped by that, it'd be daft not to do it. Yeah. It's very fulfilling. I mean, from a selfish standpoint, how can you feel any better than someone saying, "You've made a difference. I've needed that," or the latest thing is people sending their dads or their And I used to not like that. I used to be like, it's funny, so some of the uber spiritual people come to my talks, or the people that are really into personal development, and they'll leave and they say, they'd say, "Oh, it was good, you didn't really say anything I didn't already know," and they're a little bit condescending. And I think what they're missing is like, I'm trying to do this in a way that there's humor to it, and it's human, and the guys that come in with their arms folded leave without their arms folded, and are a little bit more open. I'm trying to play to the audience, and when they come to a retreat, then we can go spiritual woo-woo, but that's not going to happen. You don't have sex on the first night. You got to ease people in.
So when for those who can't see the video, there's a little bit of couch action that's going on here.
But in terms of drive, it's growth and contribution. It's like, I want to be a different, like, some people cling so hard to the identity. I'm like, I want to meet you in a year and I want to be a very different person, in terms of how I express myself, in terms of my openness and all that kind of stuff, I think.
We go back to the very first podcast that we did here, and a question I'd thrown to Andy and Marina was, when somebody leaves the gym, how do you want them feeling? So, have you an idea when somebody comes into the talk how you would like them to feel, or that they need to go away with something?
Hope is the word that I use, because I think we all need a little bit of hope at times. And again, I can present tonight in Wexford and have lots of people there thinking I have the answers, and hopefully I'll have a great evening and they will too. And then tomorrow I might need a little bit of hope, and I'll leg lock some young lad at Jiu-Jitsu.
You might be doing that in about half an hour, Paz.
But it's such a great skill to have in your back pocket. It's like, I need to feel you.
You come over here. Let me show you the dark arts.
I'll leg lock someone tomorrow, and they'll say, "Wow, can you show me how to do that?" And that'll be like, that'll be the little bit of hope that I need, and then I can keep going. So, hope, I think, is the word. But I can physically see it in people before and after. Like, they look lighter. They just look like the madness of their mind has just disappeared for a moment in time. And look, if you do that for long enough, if you keep getting still and keep giving yourself some space, the madness always disappears.
Yeah.
And again, back to the guy that sat at the docks in Dublin. If I had believed my thoughts, luckily I rang my dad at whatever time at night, and he talked me out of it. But believe in your thoughts. Like, anyone who's at their lowest point is just, they're fixated on a thought, and if you can overcome the thought.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, check urbangym.ie or facebook.com/urbangym.ie, Instagram, all the other spaces. Until next time, good luck.